So I was thinking about the book Gulag Archipelago. When I first encountered I was 15 years old. And this is the book right here. This is the exact copy that I had. It was in our house. I don't know whose book it was, my mom, my dad's, or possibly one of my relatives had left it behind, but as long as I knew, this book was in our house. And I think the movie The Gulag came out in the 80s at some point, and I recognized the word Gulag, and I went digging through our pile of books down in the basement, and I found this copy of Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. And I started reading it. It's a very dense book, but it was captivating, and I knew the subject matter because I had encountered the movie The Gulag. So I was interested in the subject matter. So I started reading. I read this book not entirely, but the first book of it while on a road trip with my dad. My dad was a long haul trucker, and he was going from our small town in the interior of British Columbia to Saskatoon during one of our school breaks. I'm not sure I don't believe it was the summer, but maybe it was like spring break or something like that, because I can remember the weather wasn't great. It was still chilly and dreary and cold. And so I had never gone out. I don't, at that point, I don't think I'd ever even been outside of the province of British Columbia. So I made the decision to go with my dad on the trip from 100 Mile House over to Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. And that's what I did. I went with him, and I spent a lot of time in the sleeper of the truck reading this book. Now, what did I learn from reading Gulag Archipelago when I was 15 years old? I think the overwhelming message that I learned from the book was that there was no way to escape the power of the government. The government had absolute power over all of us, all individuals. And as long as we complied with their directives, with their mandates, it would never change. You would be under the thumb of that government and that regime as long as people would comply. And when people complied en masse, there was little chance of changing the direction of an authoritarian regime. I can clearly remember at a certain point reading this book, and it was casting me deeper and deeper into a type of deep depression, the horror of the interrogations and the methods that they used in order to get confessions. And the realization that no matter what you did, you would always comply. There was no way to escape compliance. And I wrestled with that. I thought about it a lot. I can remember thinking, what would I do in a situation where I got dragged out of my home, put into a chair, starved, beaten, deprived of sleep? How would I retain my dignity, and how would I retain the truth? And the reality is, and I came to this conclusion even at 15 years old, is that there was no way to avoid compliance. You would comply. They would get, if they couldn't get to you physically or physiologically or emotionally or psychologically with the torture that they would impose on you, they would get to you through your family. They would threaten to torture your family. They would threaten to kill or imprison your family. So regardless of how hard and how determined you were to keep the truth, they would make you lie. They would make you inhabit that world of lies. They would ask you to sell out a neighbor or a relative, a family member, and you would do it because you had no choice. It wasn't just the emotional, psychological, and physical torture that would force you to comply. It was the reality that if you didn't comply, those that you loved would suffer. So it wasn't just a matter of you suffering. It was a matter of your entire family, your entire bloodline potentially being erased from the world. And that's an interesting thing to think about and to come to grips with when you're 15 years old. And I can remember the thought that there would only be one course of action that you could carry out in order to defeat this inevitability of compliance. And that was to not at the beginning, at the outset of the situation, when they're knocking on your door, is to not give in, to not give yourself up, to die, to defend your family and defend yourself until you died. They don't come through the door. You take as many of them out as you can with you, but you die, because that's the only freedom that you would ever have. There was no freedom in life. There was only freedom in death. And again, that's a realization that I don't know how you grapple with that, even as an adult, but as a young person, a 15-year-old, to come to the conclusion that if in the situation that the government has that type of overreach and that type of authoritarian control over your life and everyone's lives that surround you, that the only way out was death. Now, having said that, Solzhenitsyn survived, and he was able to write this book, which is groundbreaking and so important. Maybe in this day and age, more important than ever before. So that's the decision. Do you live, suffer, and do the unspeakable, or do you die and not allow them to take your truth from you? Very interesting. Anyways, it was just a thought that I had, and I was thinking about this recently, and I thought I would have a little conversation about it and explore the idea of how do you keep truth in your life when there's a powerful authority trying to steal that from you. All right, thanks for listening and tuning in. A little bit of a different video this time, but I just thought this was on my mind, and it was something, I saw it on my bookcase. I see this on my bookcase all the time. And yeah, some interesting observations about truth and living with truth. If you have any comments about this or any suggestions or ideas about this work or other works like it, please feel free to comment below, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.